Yeah, so we are an institutional VC that was born in 2016. And at that time and at that place, mainly Europe, the ecosystem wasn't rewarding basic scientific founders commercializing their technological breakthroughs. A lot of the focus was in the previous decades, the internet infrastructure, the consumer applications, the SaaS and the cloud. But given that, and I believe many of you here will agree that humanity is entering its most important century, both in terms of the existential risks that we are facing from the technologies that we're developing and the threats that we see to our democracies, to our very existence, and to our ability to progress as a species and become a universal species. Those technologies were not being adequately invested in from a venture and institutional standpoint. So we created a fund that invested in such technologies at the earliest stages, things like crypto infrastructure, the neurotech, planetary stewardship, artificial intelligence, of course, because it enables transfer functions or objective function approximations to capabilities that we previously couldn't even parameterize. And so that was ultimately the goal. And that's how we were born.
I mean, honestly, that list is pretty congruent with many of the topics that we heard about throughout this weekend. Yeah. And I really applaud it and admire it because there aren't many VCs that have such a ambitious vision for humanity. And I think you're really one of the few of them. So thanks for the work that you're doing on it.
I think that's why this relationship is so natural.
Yeah. Well, maybe if you could point us out, because I think there are a few differences between, let's say, the work that we as Foresight in a nonprofit are doing and the work that VCs are doing, obviously. And so I think for people in the room, it helps to often understand, okay, what is the kind of the stage at which you're coming in? How do you think about being too early versus being too late? Foresight has arguably been too early on a few things, including, really dreaming up ambitious science and technologies long time before they were possible, and eventually too early then eventually becomes possible. So that's from a nonprofit perspective, but how are you guys thinking about it? About the timing of where do you come in? If for people in the room, when would they contact you?
So we are an early, so if you could switch to the next slide, but we're an early stage fund. So we come in at pre-seed and seed. And now I think the timing question is a really poignant one because technologies come online specifically when the substrate for their adoption and their discovery is met, and often those are kind of circumstantial, right? You need great thinkers and engineers, but you also need the right circumstances. There's a reason why both Leibniz and Newton discovered calculus at the same time. It's because they needed it for the projects, the problems that they were working on. But we can't confuse technologies with inventions. Knowledge is not action. Technologies, discoveries are not inventions. And the one thing that I would give as an example, and this maybe is a hot take, but the big crystal pen was one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century. It's 100 billion sold. The big crystal pen, the clear pen with the blue cap, right? 100 billion of it sold, almost solely responsible for the change between 1950 when it was invented to the current day of the literacy of today. And it actually, the discovery, the ballpoint nib, was discovered in 1888 by John Loud. And it wasn't until 1950 that it was invented. And the circumstances were from the stacking of dominoes. I would say it wasn't until 1930 that Laszlo Biro and his brother created this capillary tube and the viscous ink that was necessary for the ballpoint pen. And they were selling this at the Budapest World's Fair in 1935 or so for $300 per pen in today's money, right? And so Marcel Bick was the entrepreneur who went and saw something in this capability, in this technology, in this invention, and he bought the patent in 1945, 15 years later.
Do you know for how much?
for 2 million
Okay.
in today's money. Um, and he did a few tweaks. He made it out of plastic. He gave it this like see-through barrel. He made it refillable. This anti-choking pen cap with a clip-on. All of these quality of life differences to it. But the major thing that he did is that um, he bought a manufacturing facility that could reproducibly create these balls, so that you could machine it consistently and robustly, and he did it for 10 cents a pop. Right? So there's so many different vectors along which we are seeing innovation now. And, this is a great example that we're seeing innovation grow now, both from the ability to program, the ability to decrease costs so that we can commercialize these technologies more readily. And I think the two sectors that are most responsive to that, I think, are biotechnology and artificial intelligence. Yeah, because of the computational breakthroughs and the ability to design proteins, the ability to stitch together pieces of DNA. So now we're seeing the outcomes of that inevitable cost decrease and the stacking of these dominoes.
Can you share a little bit more about which areas you're excited about there?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about artificial intelligence and bioengineering because now we can program like novel binders toward different delivery modalities. We can make therapeutics express conditionally, so in particular contexts that are disease related. But I'm also excited, and I think this is a very poignant piece, really excited about early stage discovery. In February 2025, when we're seeing a cap on indirect costs from NSF and NIH grants, where we're seeing study sections right now being held in limbo, where we're seeing SCTR and SBIR, that the small business granting agencies of the U.S. government, losing personnel, and with them the decision makers who made hundreds of millions in early stage grants for biotechnology. I think we as private funding institutions absolutely need to step in and cover that difference to prevent the slowing of biotechnology and innovation in this space. So things that we've done toward that end, we invested in a company called Clock Bio, very early stage discovery platform. What they've recently completed is a multi-million-dollar CRISPR perturbation experiment across the entire genome and identified 150 novel age-related targets, some of which are absolutely wholly novel, as to be able to drug and mine the longevity atlas to see if we can push human health span and lifespan further along. So those are the things that we're thinking about, those early stage platform deals that I think are very low in abundance, especially now. I'm from Boston. A lot of VCs are acting more as investment bankers than VCs. And so I think this is a crucial piece to cover and to be in. Another company we invested in that I'm particularly excited about was a methodology that got us a little bit closer to telepathy. So,
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
we invested in telepathy. But with the advent of language models as well as novel technology to pick up EMG data, we invested in folks that are building out a wearable that can pick up very passive speech that's silent, but is able to map that to text and language. And now we're a little bit closer to becoming a telepathic species.
In that one too. Yeah, I mean, like, I really do think that to some extent, I'm hoping that there will be a lot more intersection between especially AI and bio. Like, we're having a workshop later this year on that, especially that intersection between AI and synbio. And I'm really looking like last year I was like continuously going to people working at the main AI labs and asking them like, hey, are you doing anything for AI for science at all? Like I guess we all know there was AlphaFold 2 that was amazing. Now Retro came out with a collaboration with OpenAI. But like I think like those labs could also do a lot more of like really like steering scientific progress in many of the scientific areas rather than perhaps only focusing on the large language models. So I'm excited for anything. It's not just the year of agents this year, but it's also the year of possibly agents for automating a lot of scientific R&D.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we recently saw Google's AI scientist Copilot come out. I'm seeing a lot of companies that are right now trying to build out the capabilities for that design, test, assess loop with AI as a key orchestrator of those design cycles. And so I believe that we will see that in the coming future, such that we can do science that is hypothesis and bias free through these methodologies.
Cool. And you'll also be here after the session to answer any questions that people might have.
Talk nerdy to me.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much.